for joining us today for our webinar. MUSH Overnight Oats brand tackles food manufacturing with NetSuite. I'm very excited today to have with us Steve Gnatecki, Vice President of Supply Chain at MUSH, Joe Recupero, the Manager of Solution Architecture at Myers-Holum, and Josh Knight, a Senior Consultant at Myers-Holum. And again, I'm Rebecca Rowe, your moderator today, Marketing Director at Myers-Holum. So Steve, without any greater ado, let's get to the meat of this. Give us a little bit of background about you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Gnatecki. I lead the corporate supply chain group at MUSH. Prior to MUSH, my start in supply chain was in logistics and transportation. I worked for a few trucking companies and a freight brokerage. Eventually, I landed at a company called RX Bar, and I helped scale that business from an online, D2C protein bar brand to sort of like an internationally known snacking company today. That business was acquired by the Kellogg company, and so I spent some time, growing that business both domestically as well as internationally, as well as, after an integration with Kellogg, spent some time within the corporate structure with K. Ultimately, I decided to join a pirate ship once again, and I jumped on with MUSH, and I'm really excited about the opportunity. At MUSH, my role is leading all of the corporate supply chain functions. So we define that as logistics, transportation, any procurement, whether that's raw materials, packaging, or services, as well as customer supply chain, so how we're interacting with our customers, managing their trade inventory, as well as planning. So, supply planning, production planning, those sorts of things.
And Joe, what about you?
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm Joseph Recupero. I'm a Manager of Solution Architecture at Myers-Holum. So my role is to scope NetSuite projects, so essentially work with customers and with the team, put together the right solution, the right roadmap, the plans, the estimates, and so on. So our role is really instrumental to leading to successful implementation and to make clients successful on the NetSuite product. My background's in project management, been managing projects roughly 20 years and worked with the NetSuite product last 12 years or so. So thank you very much for attending this webinar today.
And Josh?
Thanks, Rebecca. Josh Knight, Senior Consultant. So I'm the bridge between what Joe has scoped and what Steve wants to implement. So my job is to take that vision and help mold it into a reality with the client, in this case with Steve and his team at MUSH. I've bounced back and forth between consulting and the business, largely in supply chain, logistics, manufacturing over the last 20 or so years.
And Josh, could you go through the agenda for us?
Absolutely. So we just had the introductions. Next up, we'll have Steve talking a little bit about MUSH. We'll walk through the ERP and WMS automation functionality that we installed, what production looks like with the ERP and WMS, and the ways we installed MUSH's somewhat unique production model into NetSuite, some of the lessons learned that we had from this implementation, and then we'll open it up for Rebecca to moderate a Q&A session.
Wonderful. So, Steve, could you tell us a little bit about MUSH? I know a lot of us are very familiar with it from the consumer end, but we'd like to hear about it from your perspective.
Sure. So I can tell you the story as I know it. What I will tell you is I haven't been around MUSH too long, about 18 months. So I certainly wasn't here back in 2015 when it was founded. But our founder and CEO, Ashley Thompson, she was working on Wall Street for a company called Goldman Sachs, which I think some folks probably have heard of. She was putting in long hours, up early, very focused on her health and well-being. And one of the things that she consumed on the regular was actually homemade overnight oats that she brought to the office. Ultimately, after spending some time on Wall Street, she made a lifestyle change and made a decision to move to Southern California and started MUSH. So originally, when she was making the product, with her co-founder, They were packaging it up, self-manufacturing it, bringing it to farmers markets, small coffee shops, retail locations, really kind of boots on the ground or organic development of the business. Over time, it really caught on, right? As a true ready-to-eat cereal option that doesn't have a bunch of fillers or extras in it. It really is kind of what you see there. So over time, the business has expanded, due to some proprietary processes and that sort of difficult manufacturing process that Josh alluded to. Mush really is a pioneer in the category of truly a cold soaked overnight style option that is both retail ready and widely available. Typically, it's something that doesn't have a ton of shelf life and makes it tough to be a mass market consumable product. But through our manufacturing process and sort of our supply chain processes, we're able to get it out in the market so that folks can enjoy it, whether that's at home or packing it with them out to lunch. Today we are the category leader for this type of product. It is still an ascent category. We're still coaching and teaching people quite often about cold oats, right? Often one of the first things I hear is cold oats. I like my oatmeal hot. And then you kind of can gently remind someone that box of Cheerios you picked up, that first ingredient on that box is oats. So people have been eating cold oats for a long time. They just might not look like oats. Long story short, that's really where we come in, somewhere at the intersection of something like ready-to-eat cereal and yogurt. You'll find us in a refrigerated aisle at many grocery and retail locations near you. We also offer it through our website, but I highly encourage anybody to pick it up and give it a try.
Excellent. So for the bulk of this conversation, we're looking to hear your story, Steve, about your ERP journey. And to start off with, we'd like to hear about some of the challenges that MUSH has faced and how that sparked the need for an ERP evaluation and selecting an ERP.
Sure. So when I joined MUSH in the fall of 2021, the business was really at an inflection point. It was seeing some really steady growth in the marketplace. It had been around for 5 or 6 years and had been very diligent in sort of the way in which it had grown, expanded into retail. There had been some continuous improvement in both the product as well as the packaging. The original format was sort of this oval cup with a lid and spoon, really meant for on-the-go, direct-to-consumer sort of options. But the team kind of quickly realized some benefits into getting into a more traditional form factor, sort of that round bowl-style cup that we have today. And as some of those changes came, there was a little bit of a rebrand. The product started to catch the consumer's eye at just sort of a different speed and at a different level. People were starting to understand more and more about the benefits of the product and how they could use it and enjoy it in their daily lives. And so velocity was starting to really change. The consumer, there was a lot of momentum building in the marketplace. And ultimately, due to some of the difficulty in the process, the decision was made to sort of repatriate manufacturing and distribution. So previously, MUSH had used, a co-manufacturing partner and other partners who helped distribute the product out to the various retail locations. But the decision was made at a leadership level a little bit before my time, but certainly I embraced it, that the business was going to try to control its own destiny. And so with all of that being said, I quickly realized upon starting that we really needed a tool that could scale with us, right? We were scaling our own internal operations. The amount of data we could capture and collect and learn from was increasing. Some of the legacy sheets and tools that had been built out worked very well, extremely well, actually, for a business at the size it was. But that being said, we knew we had a different size and scale on the horizon and not too distant. And so ultimately, we decided that it was going to be time for a change.
So you've talked about scalability, having this tremendous velocity. What systems did you evaluate to come up with selecting NetSuite and then, of course, implemented by Myers-Holum?
Sure. So, what I would say to that is I had familiarity with NetSuite. This is my second NetSuite install. We evaluated some of the competitors out in the marketplace. I've seen I've seen everything from Sage to various SAP instances. There's some more, there's some smaller things out in the market for different D2C style brands and brands at different life stages. But ultimately, even though we went through some of that evaluation, my familiarity with NetSuite, I think helped provide me a very good argument to make with kind of our leadership team. The goals we really had for the ERP were that it would be cloud-based, that people could access it anywhere, that it would be secure, right? As our business is growing, and we do have sort of a unique business model today, right? We're not just doing what everybody else does. There's not many brands quite like us in our space. So it's really important that our data is secure and that we can maintain the integrity. We wanted something that could scale with us. So, even if it was maybe a little bit more robust when we went live, we knew our plans were to grow and that the team would continue to grow. And so we wanted something that could help live through, kind of the different life stages our brand was going to go through over the next, call it, 3, 5, 10 years potentially. Some of the things we really like about NetSuite is it's highly configurable. Any of the forms that come sort of stock or native are easily modifiable with sort of different, fields or workflows or different things that you can do to really configure the tool to your specific needs. And, we are not, as I sort of mentioned, a cookie cutter product, making something you've seen every day. So it is important that we had a level of control around how it would be configured. And then additionally, right, NetSuite does a lot of things really well, but there's also a lot of great other tools. And I would say that NetSuite has a pretty robust ecosystem of users, especially in food and beverage today, and food and beverage around our size. There's people at similar businesses across the board that are using it. So, it's not difficult to build a good network, right? And to have other folks in food and beverage that you can talk to, how they're using it, how they're leveraging it. Additionally, there's a lot of other great tools that it plays well with nicely that you can bolt on that can add additional value, to your specific needs. So I think all of those things, right? If I was going to sum it up, being cloud-based and secure, something that was going to scale with us, highly configurable, a robust ecosystem that, allows the platform to play well with others.
So I think a great segue then to on that is for you, Joe and Josh, what are you seeing then as common trends in F&B? I mean, Steve just touched on that as well. Can you give some insights from some of our other F&B food and beverage clients, what you're seeing in terms of trends?
Sure. Do you want to take that, Joe?
Sure. So it depends always on where the company is today and what they're doing today and what they see as a current process that can be improved. So we have clients that are starting to look into automation. So using robots for certain operation like packaging, sometimes also for the picking. So that's an avenue that we're seeing is going to be big in the future. There's also traceability, which has been there for a long time in the food industry. So being able to quickly trace what raw materials were used in our final product. So that's another example that's strong, as well as omnichannels for sales. So Steve alluded to that they sell from a website, but they also have a large distribution network and retailers and so on. So that's also something that where NetSuite adds a lot of value and simplifies those processes and optimizes them.
Thank you. And Steve, could you talk a little bit through how MUSH uses NetSuite today?
Sure. So the way I would describe it is NetSuite's sort of the center of our data universe, right? It's the repository and the hub of all of the activity that's taking place. So if something doesn't update NetSuite or NetSuite doesn't show it sort of didn't happen in our finances or our operations. So it's really important that no matter what tool something might be taking place or where an activity might be occurring, that ultimately it's got to make its way into NetSuite, right? So, from an order to cash perspective, we're using SPS Commerce for EDI. So we've got EDI orders flowing through, right, from a sales orders perspective. On the outbound side, we can interchange and trade invoices back out to our customers, right, who are placing those sales orders. We place purchase orders out to all of our vendors and suppliers, right, to make to conduct procurement activities and to pull items and packaging it into our warehouses and into our process. Also, intercompany transfers. So we own and operate our own warehouse, as well as our own manufacturing location. So all of the movement of raw material and finished goods between those locations are ultimately taking place as well. Additionally, using sort of the NetSuite language, all of our work orders. So what are we going to build? How much? When is it going to occur? And what are the costs, right? So Joseph mentioned all of that traceability. We have the granular level detail of all of the components that went into each individual production run, what the yields were, what comes out of that. We leverage standard costs to really be able to get into the details of what we project our cost to be and what they actually sort of result as. There's different ways to measure and cost out your inventory, but we chose to use standards, which often is something kind of traditionally done in food and beverage. I would say that we just have, very granular detail of our financials, and there's strong breadcrumb trails of sort of all of the activities taking place. We aren't leveraging every native component of NetSuite yet. That was part of our decision making in the implementation to really focus on a core set of users and core functionality we need first. But I think we're excited to maybe expand it in the future.
And what are some of the benefits you've actually seen? And since you've implemented NetSuite, has there been an impact, a business impact on this after this implementation?
Sure. You could talk about some of the general impacts, right, that come from an ERP, like a quick reduction in manual data entry, right? Things that normally you were manually keying a purchase order, whether it came through an email, a PDF, SPS is online portal that things can come in through into your spreadsheet or wherever you house that data, to have it naturally flow through, right, with pricing, with trade, all of that sort of included is definitely a benefit. We're probably dealing with more than double the volume than when we started, and I haven't added any headcount. So the same amount of folks can really manage a significantly larger volume of transactions that are occurring. I would also just mention like speed and precision, right? So, running your own manufacturing business or your own warehouse without a WMS, oftentimes you're sort of making some conservative estimates as you wait for actuals or yields to sort of pull through. If things were occurring on paper and spreadsheets, they had to be sort of cleaned or audited to make sure that things were ticking and tying off correctly. Right now that data is flowing through our Parity Factory WMS, comes right into NetSuite. And it's at a level of granular detail. It's almost overwhelming, right? We're still sort of learning how to maybe leverage and utilize some of the data that comes through. But from an accuracy perspective, from the speed, there's tremendous sort of upside there, right? Of how quickly you can take on more work without, needing to necessarily hire a bunch more folks.
Sure. Now, we're all very excited. We go to the grocery store and we have our favorite. Mine is blueberry. A lot of our colleagues is vanilla, as we've talked about before. But there's peanut butter that some of my family, peanut butter mush that some of my family triathletes love. There's many other flavors. I mean, you guys are just expanding to every store and just growing really rapidly. So how has NetSuite and Myers-Holum been able to enable that growth, for the foreseeable future?
Sure. As I mentioned, sort of the ability to execute at speed and precision is critical. Where I think NetSuite and Myers really help is sort of with the change management of an implementation and a go live. I mentioned earlier that I've been through it before. Different implementation partner the first time through. This time, one of the benefits of an organization like Myers is they have a lot of experts, right? They have people who've seen this before, have worked with food and beverage. They are very diligent in their upfront processes to capture information, to record how your business is operating today, but also to speak through what might need to change, right? Because just because you're doing something outside the system doesn't mean it's what you want to translate into the new ecosystem, right? So that idea of sort of maybe garbage in or garbage out not that a process was garbage, but maybe it wasn't perfect, right? Maybe there's an opportunity to leverage some more best-in-class knowledge of how to execute or how you're actually maybe supposed to record some of your financials. There's a lot you can learn and leverage with strong partners, and obviously having their knowledge of the system, the tool, how others have used it and utilize it. It can really speed up the process on how you get from sort of point A to maybe point C. Because you're going to go through that implementation where, maybe you thought you wanted to do something one way, or maybe you thought this was going to be best, but in a business like Mush, we're growing so fast that what worked 60 days ago isn't going to work 30 days from now. And so going through that journey with a strong partner and having a system that can scale and adapt to those different life stages quickly, certainly a benefit.
It's really excellent to hear so many amazing positive impact that it's had, and this is, early days. So maybe now we could turn to Joe. Just you could give us a quick view from your perspective how NetSuite's used across the food and beverage industry.
Sure. So what we're seeing here is an example of a fair stairway, for the food and beverage industry. So this is not a mandatory stairway, but it's just an example of companies using NetSuite and growing with NetSuite to address further needs and further requirements. So growing with the platform, growing with the product. So for instance, in this example, the company addresses the urgent needs in the established step, and then they grow. They add warehouse management and so on, maybe multi-site. As the company grows, it becomes distributed and so on. So this is the idea, and that's what my team works on. We work with clients to establish this upfront if the plan is available up front, or at least to define first what will phase 1, phase 2 look like. And the idea is to provide value as quickly as possible and have short implementation that provide a lot of value, and then grow with that as the business expands and grows. So maybe this next slide here is an example of what features NetSuite offers to help food and beverage companies. So they're all concepts that are in the product and that food and beverage leverage. So for instance, one of the core ones is the recipes. How do we manufacture these different products that we're selling? So that's one of the things that we can help with, and that has impacts on the supply chain. So what materials do I need to, or what ingredients do I need to produce my product? And also, if manufacturing steps are involved, and there typically is multiple steps in food and beverage, it will be old stages or sometimes batches and sub formulations and packaging in different size of containers. So that's what this first step does, the production details. There's also some companies that leverage NetSuite for the nutritional values and have the system perform some calculations. So that's something that's mandatory in the food and beverage industry in a lot of markets. NetSuite can help with that. There's often considerations around could we just go back?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go quickly over the rest. There's often consideration around costing, which was the case for MUSH. So we used standard costing at MUSH, but there's also average costing that some companies will use. And ultimately, that's how you establish profitability, by having a good control over your cost of materials. And that fluctuates in the food industry over time. So it's something NetSuite provides value with. Pricing, both on the sell side, purchase side, obviously. Supply chain replenishment strategy, making sure we have the right ingredients before we start producing the batch. All of that are features that are important. There's the concept of unit of measure. In some cases, a concept called catch weight, which means, for instance, cheese that is cut. Every piece of cheese is one piece, but might have a different weight. So those are concepts that are very specific to the food industry, and where Myers has some proprietary IP. So we have some recipes or some ways of handling that in the NetSuite product. I touched on this earlier, lot traceability. So providing traceability, knowing what ingredients are used in what batch, knowing where that batch was shipped. All of those are super important in the food industry. There's also allergen control that some of our customers leverage, meaning you can't produce on the same line all your products, or maybe you need to have time between different batches to have time to clean it up. So those are considerations that NetSuite can help with. And finally, financials, obviously, that's the start. So if I had to summarize financials, how do you produce your goods? What are your goods? How do you get them? Purchasing the right thing at the right time, making sure we have it. Selling it, so controlling all the EDI, the different marketplaces, and sending the goods to the right customers when they need it, collecting. That's essentially what we do. And the next slide is an example of that, of one of the process. So it's a different way to view the same thing. It shows quality also. NetSuite does handle quality management, so we can have inspections at different stages. So that's also one of the feature that's leveraged by some customers. And we can switch. So here, these are two common partners that we use for food and beverage. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar here, but NetSuite has a Suite App Marketplace. Think it's similar to an app store. So it's somewhere where you can buy applications that extend NetSuite functionality. And there's two that we often use in the food and beverage industry. First one's called Parity Factory. It's a WMS that's made for the food industry. So it handles all the traceability that's needed in the food industry. It provides handheld support, so users can scan as they're producing, picking materials, shipping them out. It can handle the holds, so the management of that and the inspections at the right time. And also, they're one of the partners that handles automation, so they can integrate with instruments and take it to the next level if your company is ready to go there. And another partner that's often that we leverage, and both these partners are great, we work with them often, is Blend ERP. They build, it's an extension to the NetSuite product. It's built on the NetSuite platform itself. And what it does, it extends the formulation and recipe management. So I referred earlier to, you have a list of ingredients, but you can package that in different sizes. This Blend ERP makes that easy. So you manage your recipes from one place, and it can handle all the different flavors that are done at a step of a process, or for packaging that product in different sizes. It helps with that. So that if there's an update required or a change in recipe, you can apply it across the board very simply. They also help with batch manufacturing. So if you have multiple production line, different reactor sites, it handles all the mats to make that easy for the users and operators. And finally, they are a bartender supplier implementer on the NetSuite platform. So what that means is they're the experts in printing labels and documentation for your process as you're running through the process. So both great partners will make recommendations during implementation when we see a fit for their solutions.
Thank you so much, Joe. So now I'd like to turn this over to you, Steve and Josh, and get your kind of sum up of the lessons learned during this whole process and post.
Sure. Josh, you want me to dive in here first?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
All right. So from a transactions perspective, yeah, I mentioned earlier that we do here at MUSH standard costing for all of our products on sort of how we manage our raw material cost and how we manage the valuation of our inventory. You know, one of the things that we quickly learned is that how NetSuite calculates that is not necessarily really clear if you're using really small quantities of items. And so we were getting some calculations that just didn't look quite right the way they would in a spreadsheet. But as soon as we learned that, hey, you know, put a full batch through, right? Put a large production run through as you would in sort of daily life. And it definitely came out much cleaner and more accurate. So something of a detail to speak to. And I would highlight, you know, Josh and Myers' team where there wasn't a really clean answer to be had of sort of why some of the tests we were executing weren't coming out the way we planned. But ultimately, we drove, we were able to present some research together, but we were able to very quickly understand, you know, what was the heights of those different values in the transaction. And that big learning is here we see something
Hey, Steve, I think we're having a little trouble hearing you. I just got a message saying.
I didn't change anything. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just faded a little bit right at the end.
All right, Josh, maybe you jump in to clean it up.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So standard methodology is we start with a smaller batch size, and then we gradually grow that. And we check the financials as we go through the functional process. What we found with MUSH is that the quantities for small batches are 6-7 decimal points, 6-7 digits to the right of the decimal point. The quantities are so small that the standard cost calculation was having a hard time with it. So we didn't initially, I should say, progress past that small batch test, thinking that we weren't getting the right response. So what we're able to do, Steve mentioned earlier that we do have a broad team at Myers. So we're able to bring in Mark, who's one of our principal consultants and quite an expert in standard cost, and bring him in, and together with the NetSuite support team, we were able to help test through that and prove out that the system was indeed working correctly. It was a matter of sizing, not setup or an issue with the system itself.
Thank you both for that. Lessons learned. I wanted to now go to Q&A. It looks like we have a few questions. I'd like to start with one question that, see here, we've got a few coming in. I think this one would be for Joe. Is it possible to do a phased approach with Parity Factory and NetSuite?
Yes, it can be done in phased approach. It depends always what the client's doing today, what are the pain points, what are the priorities, and based on that, we establish what the roadmap and priorities should be. A lot of projects will do both side by side, so that's what we see, I would say, most often if Parity Factory will be used, but it's possible to defer them and add Parity Factory later on.
I would speak to that as somebody who just did both, and I would say that I would recommend doing them both together, because how you configure items and how things are set up in NetSuite, on the flip side, in Parity, you're going to want them to sync up so that you're not having to go back and duplicate the work. So in my experience going through the implementation, I would argue best practice would probably be to try to do them together all at once, if you can support it.
Thanks for the perspective, Steve.
Yeah, there's requirements from both systems that have to meet in the middle. So I think having that information up front is probably the more valuable of the two approaches.
Yeah, it's really good to get the real world perspective there, Steve. Thank you. Then we have another one that I think we have time for before we go, and the others will be answered via email. But basically, this one's easy to ask, but maybe hard to answer. What's next for MUSH? They're asking for a sneak peek.
Sure. So, our business is playing with a lot of different macronutrient profiles, trying to capture different day parts. So you've seen some reformulation of our peanut butter SKU, beefing up some of the protein count in that, and a peanut butter chocolate. We launched an original flavor that is more broadly appealing as well, on a larger size, up to 18 ounces, something really easy to have in your fridge, as you could scoop into a bowl, throw some yogurt, throw some fruit, whatever you might want on top, right? And it's a really good foundational base for a delicious breakfast or snack later in the day. We continue to kind of explore different packaging formats, more indulgent flavors, things so that folks don't only sort of pigeonhole it into breakfast. I find my wife really likes chocolate, and chocolate has sort of replaced some of that ice cream snacking in the evening. So it's, capturing more of those different day parts and more of those different occasions is important. At the end of the day, we're still educating a lot of consumers around the product, and we're really focused on that core product line. A lot of the investment right now is about scaling it up and getting it into as many hands and mouths as possible.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for taking your time today. Thank you to the audience for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you here. Thank you, Josh and Joe, for your time as well. What I will do is make sure we get a recording out to everyone, a link to that recording, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Have a great day.
Bye.
Have a great day.